Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, October 7th. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris here with you. A lot has happened. The division series are all underway. NL side, 2 games through. AL side having game 2s here on Monday. So we'll talk about the breakdowns of what happened over the weekend and what we can expect here as those series continue on. Eno, how was your weekend?
Good. My 9-year-old turned 10. So I had a house full of screaming children. The internet went out for 2 days. So
Did they break it?
I had an earful of screaming children. Why is the internet not working?
That's tough. For that age, especially because the internet's just always been there, right? We're old enough. We lived in a time when the internet wasn't available in our homes.
I was like, go read a book.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually don't mind if it goes down any time of day, like after work is over until my son's asleep. So between like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon until about 9 o'clock, if the internet goes out, I don't care because I'm not watching TV. I'm not really on my phone for that little window anyway. I'm catching up once he goes to sleep. If it's down when he goes to sleep, then I turn into your kid. Then it makes me very upset.
This is my time. I'm supposed to have a hour here before I fall asleep.
So it's a lot of profanity, a lot of unplugging and replugging the router, all that stuff.
We've had a crazy heat situation here. So I think yesterday the Bay Area set overall highs for that date, or maybe forever highs. 97 in the city, and it was crazy. Down here it was hit 100, and usually this happens in September for us. So I bet you, some component melted or something. There was a brownout, and so I think it was related to that. But yeah, So it was, and then just the general running around and taking the children to the Little League games, which were being played in 85, 90-degree weather, and so the kids were pretty gassed after everything.
Welcome to summer in the Midwest, living out on the West Coast, man. It's rough out there right now. Hopefully everybody's staying safe. I know it's hurricane season. It's already been a bad one with Hurricane Helene, and I've seen some reports about Hurricane Milton being a big one coming that way too. So just stay safe out there. Let's get to some of the games from the weekend, though. We have 4 series to catch up on. We'll start with the one that gets underway first on Monday, just so the previews all sort of line up, and there's a chance some folks might actually hear everything before the games start. The Guardians opened up the ALDS series with the Tigers, the Game 1 win, got on the board early and often. They became the first American League team to score 5 runs before recording an out to start a playoff game, according to Stats Perform. Stephen Kwan narrowly missed a leadoff homer. There was a walk. There was a Jose Ramirez error or double, depending on how they finally scored that later. I think they flipped it at least once right after it happened. There was a Josh Naylor single, and then Reese Olson came in, gave up a homer that Lane Thomas took out of the yard. So it was a quick strike for the Guardians, and it was all they needed. They were able to cruise behind Tanner Bybee in that bullpen thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, a lot maybe should be rightly made about the decision to pitch Tyler Holton to begin the game, but in the end, if you score 0 runs, it's pretty much impossible to win the game. So on some level, it was on the bats there. But, bringing in a lefty reliever makes some sense because, Stephen Kwan, a lefty, is at the top of that lineup. And I think maybe more importantly, you're looking ahead to Josh Naylor, and you're just like, if there are people on base and Josh Naylor steps to the plate, I'd rather have a lefty up there than a righty. Because the splits for Kwan, he has the exact same batting average against lefties and righties. And I know this is not a batting average show, but
it is not.
I just thought that was kind of amazing because for any player, like he's like one of the few players where like maybe batting average does capture a lot of what he does. So like him having a 285 batting average lifetime against lefties and righties means I don't think I need to split him. Turn him around. I don't need, to have a lefty against him. Then you have David Fry, a righty, and then Jose Ramirez, a switch hitter, you looked at the splits. He's pretty much equal.
Yeah, I mean, over the course of a very long career, I think this year, if you just look at 2024, he's done very, very well against lefties, but you can't take a 1 year split against lefties and put a ton of stock into it. So I think it did come down to if someone's going to be on base against Naylor and against the top of the Guardians order, you're sort of expecting maybe one guy to reach base. Then you've got the matchup you want. Maybe get through that matchup, get out of the first inning unscathed, give it to Olson, have Olson go 3, 4, or 5 innings, depending on how it's going, and work from there. I guess the other consideration, too, the Guardians are mixing and matching right now with David Fry and Kyle Manzardo. So if you decide to use a lefty opener, you're sort of pushing David Fry into the lineup as opposed to Manzardo. So maybe there's a preference there, but I do think the Naylor plate appearance is the one you're probably thinking the most about in that entire sequence.
And it went okay, for Tyler Holton at first because he threw an inside sinker, lefty sinker. That's a good pitch. Got, I believe, a foul. And then he threw an inside sweeper, so front door sweeper to him. So that's a pitch that's going at Naylor and then came across the plate and got a called strike. Now, I think it was a bad idea. I think he should have gone back to the fastball because he went to the sweeper again and it was more outside. And Naylor had just seen a pitch that came at him and came over the plate. Now he sees a pitch that's on the same plane but just further out. I think he is prepared for that to some extent. So he pulled that for a single, and then that set up the big Lane Thomas thing. The other thing about Lane Thomas that's interesting is, month-to-month splits, not super interesting to me, but in his case, here's a guy who has been so hot and cold power-wise. I don't think I've seen splits like this on a lot of guys. So Lane Thomas had a 280, a .07 ISO in March, a 287 in May, a 250 in June, a .08 in July, a .05 in August, and then a .297 ISO in September. That's Lane Thomas. So I don't know. I think the thing that messes that up is like maybe he just saw a lot of lefties in those months and saw a lot of righties in the other months or whatever it is. But it's just funny to have all this set up, then go and be like, okay, well, now we're going to Reese Olson, righty on righty. That's what we want. And Lane Thomas is like, no, this is not what you want.
Well, Reese Olson threw a slider that was just middle of the plate, just a bad miss, right? And Thomas made him pay for it. That's what happens in the big leagues. But I think that's another instance of you had the matchup you wanted, flipping that switch, even though there was traffic. For his career, Lane Thomas has a 27.8% K rate against righties, an 87 WRC plus. He does a lot of his damage against lefties, and he's a slightly below average hitter right on right with a lot less power too. So for him to do what he did in that spot is really just a lack of execution. In a situation where Olson doesn't come out of the bullpen with guys on base very often. Usually use like a regular starter.
You did like those are kind of two slightly improbable events. What you're talking about is, Josh Naylor hitting a lefty on lefty sweeper, pulling it for a hit, and then Lane Thomas, who struggles against righties, getting a righty on righty slider and hitting it for power. So I guess you could say that the Tigers' process wasn't terrible, but
no, and I wouldn't expect it to be. But the Guardians just did what they had to do and executed. So you got to give them
to some extent, though. For the Guardians, like you should have won their Tanner Bybee start.
Yes, and the one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and we know the Guardians have a great bullpen, and with a big lead, especially, and especially with an off day on Sunday, it really didn't matter. As soon as Parker Meadows reached the third time through the order, when it flipped over, that was it for Bybee. And it was Cade Smith, it was Tim Herron, it was Hunter Gaddis, it was Emmanuel Clase for those last 13 outs. It was the first time that Tanner Bybee didn't complete 5 innings in a start since July 5th. I mean, he's been consistently through 5, often going 6 or 7. I don't think we're going to see that script very often unless a game is even more out of hand than this one was. I mean, that was a spot where they knew, like, let's just take it out of his hands because our bullpen is absolute nails. So I think you have to give Stephen Vogt credit for just saying, all right, a guy got on, that's it. Maybe that was the threshold. As soon as a base runner reached, that was it for Tanner Bybee's day.
Yeah, but when you have such an excellent bullpen like that, you're going to go to it earlier. So Cade Smith has the third best splitter by Stuff Plus this year behind Fernando Cruz and John Duran. So like, good pitch there. What he also does is he uses the fastball high and low in the zone with command, and it's a high stuff fastball that you can throw high in the zone or low in the zone. So that's already kind of 2 pitches out of 1. And then he uses the sweeper mostly against righty and the splitter mostly against lefties. Didn't throw one same-handed in this game, but he was also super efficient. Like, just got 4 outs on like 18 pitches. So, having a weapon like Cade Smith that, not a lot of guys have a long mental Rolodex against a rookie like that, who's efficient, command stuff that works against both sides. Like they're gonna use a lot of Cade Smith in this situation. I think that's gonna be their favored use of him as first guy out to get third time through the order, top of the third time through the order, right? That's a really tough spot. You don't actually want to bring your 5th best reliever out into that situation.
No,
it would actually
ideally
make more
no.
sense to bring your 2nd or 3rd best reliever out into that situation. But now you've got Skubal coming in this game, and this is where the Tigers need to punch back, because
and
you can say, okay, you won your Bybee game, now give us our Skubal game, and then we'll start the series again.
And then we'll go back to Detroit, and we'll have a ruckus crowd that's been waiting a little while for some playoff baseball that'll be happy to have us back. But I think the question is always tough. Like, at one of the weeks we did a breakdown of how I'd pitched this guy. It was Bobby Witt Jr., and you were gone. So I played the role of you. Bad week to do that, because Bobby Witt Jr.'s only glaring weakness is the down and away slider if he's not looking for it. This is like kind of like the way you get Bobby Witt Jr. out.
Dot the corner.
You can dot that, sequence it right, where maybe he chases one outside the zone, and then maybe get him looking at one later in the count. Maybe then you can get Bobby Witt Jr. out. But how do you approach Tarik Skubal if you're the Guardians? They only saw him once during the regular season, despite being in division. So I think that actually makes this a little bit more difficult. The broader strategy I would have is try to spoil as many pitches as you can, because at least Skubal is in the zone a lot. The problem is his stuff is so filthy, it's hard to hit it even when it's in the zone. But what's the best way to try and find something that works against this guy?
I was a little surprised by this, but if you look at his heat maps for Tarik Skubal, he's on the left here. He's not great low and in against righties. And I have 2 things to say to that. First, everything is relative. The red numbers there look red, and that's great, except that the best ISO for the hitter is a 129 ISO, middle. And so, you've got a little bit of a weakness there. And on the right, you'll see that John Kensky Noel, that's actually a spot that he hits well, is low and in. And so I think this is slightly because Skubal has a great riding four seam and a great changeup. So he's really used to, like, I can dot the top of the zone with my fastball and play off that low and away. And I don't know, maybe his slider is not actually his very best pitch. And if he gets it low and in the zone, it's not the back foot that he wants, right? Maybe that's the kind of hanging slider a little bit if it's like low and in the zone. And so the other thing that I like about this matchup, and sort of circling Noel against Skubal, is I kind of like the idea of having a hacker against a guy with great command. If you have a guy that goes up to the plate, who's really disciplined, like a Juan Soto, and you have him go up against a guy who has great command, I have a feeling you could see some called strikes, because the hitter's going to be like, no. And then the pitcher's going to be like, no, I'm actually really good at this. Right?
Yeah, battles in the shadow zone, like extreme shadow zone battles.
Right. And then also you're seeding a lot of the power in the battle between you and the pitcher to the umpire. Like to a third person that's not involved. So not playing between the two of you. So I think a hacker gets up there and has a pitch type they're looking for, and the command guy is normally closer to the zone. So if they're closer to the zone, you got a hacker and he sees a good pitch, then he home runs, I think. So You looked at some of the guys who faced Kirby, and it I don't know. We're just sort of
Yeah.
eyeballing this, but
Right. So we use George Kirby as an extreme example of probably the guy that has the best command in the game right now. And we're like, well, who hits George Kirby? Kerry Carpenter's got 4 homers against him in 8 plate appearances. Anthony Santander has faced him a lot, 15 plate appearances, 2 homers, 6
Kerry
hits as
Carpenter's
well.
a little bit more of a disciplined guy, but he's a 4-seam hitter.
Mm-hmm.
So Kirby loves his 4-seam.
But yeah, Santander sort of fits that little more of a aggressive hack sort of approach. And there you go, multiple home runs and overall success in a, again, limited sample. So it's one of those things you look up and down. You're like, okay, yeah, maybe that approach works. Zach Galoff, a little bit more of a free swinger. He's gotten pretty good numbers against George Kirby so far as well. So that's the kind of mindset you have. I think it makes sense, at least as a theory, where it's just like, you're looking high, you're looking low, you're looking away, you're looking in. You have a general plan, a pitch type you're looking for, and you're just letting it rip. And there's a better chance it's in the zone because someone with really good command can be really close to the zone. So yeah, Jhonkensy Noel may be a bit of a potential unsung hero coming in game 2. Interesting here.
Like, how much does a 47% chase rate matter on Noel if Skubal's not really throwing it that much out of the zone?
Well, Skubal knows that, though. Like, it's, so I just want to see how that matchup plays out, just because it kind of caught our eyes.
I love Skubal's energy. He's the most roaringest pitcher out there right now.
What do you think about Matthew Boyd getting the call in game 2 for the Guardians instead of Gavin Williams?
I mean, he's the opposite of Skubal in terms of demeanor. And he's just going to kind of soft toss you to death. I think that maybe some of it has to do with the schedule. If you've got a rest day afterwards,
you do.
I think you can go to Boyd and just empty the bullpen, and everyone gets a day off afterwards. So I do think that's actually part of some of the decision making we've seen. Christopher Sanchez in over Aaron Nola. I think the Christopher Sanchez in the Phillies series for game 2, people talked a lot about his home splits, and maybe that was part of it. Maybe he's a young pitcher who's more comfortable at home. But I think part of it also was that they get a day off now, and they were going to go to the bullpen at some point. It didn't work out, and we'll talk about that at another point. But I think that has to do with the decision to go with Boyd. Boyd is going to go 3 innings or something.
Yeah, 1 time to the order for Matthew Boyd is probably what you're hoping for. If you get more, great, but you're not really expecting that if you're Stephen Vogt and the Guardians on Monday. Let's take a look at the other ALDS series that will resume in the Bronx on Monday night. The Yankees took game 1 over the Royals in a game that featured 5 lead changes, the most in postseason history. This was a great back and forth battle with a few of the, let's say, lowercase G goats from the regular season coming through and playing a significant role. Alex Verdugo, both sides of the ball, played well. Gleyber Torres homered. Yeah, it was a huge catch that was a near highlight reel for the wrong reasons, but he pulled it in. MJ Melendez homered in this one. There were a lot of things that were intriguing to me throughout this game. The Royals were really testing Juan Soto. They had an early second inning send of Sal Perez where Sal was pretty clearly out by a lot, where I just thought, oh, wow, interesting send. Not a lot of respect for Juan Soto, I think, kind of built into that. And the other thing that I noticed in the middle of this game, the Royals could have been underbellied a lot worse by the worst part of their bullpen. I think John Schreiber actually did a pretty good job of getting out of a jam that Angel Zerpa had created, and that kept the Royals alive in a game where one swing could have put this one out of reach. So it feels like one that really got away in a few ways for the Royals because Garrett Cole started and because they had a few leads. And playoff baseball is tough like this. You've got that back and forth happening where you had to rely too much on some relievers that you probably don't want to rely on if you're the Royals. The big takeaway for me, too many free passes, right? They walked 8 hitters in the history of baseball's playoffs. Teams that walk 8 or more guys in a 9-inning game are 23-73. So yeah, you hit that threshold of too many walks, and you paid for it.
It was an exciting game. I think was Jason Stark that pointed out that this had 5 lead changes.
Yep,
and that was tied for the
record.
the most in the playoff game, and it was really back and forth. I do like what you were pointing out about the people who hadn't had great seasons, coming through with Melendez, but Gleyber Torres as well, Alex Verdugo, Clay Holmes, with 5 clean outs. Garrett Cole, on the other hand, it was a little bit worrisome for me because he gave up 3, 6, 9, 11 hard hit balls, I believe, in 5 innings, and he did get his strikeouts, 4 strikeouts. It wasn't the greatest appearance, and this is a lineup that has struggled to score all year. And you'd think a vintage Cole would come out there and do a little better against this lineup in particular. So I don't know where that leaves the Yankees, for the full year. We had been taking some bets. There's a postseason velo bump this year, as in every year. Someone asked me what would Garrett Cole average on the fastball, and I said at least 96.5. He averaged 96.6. I think that's would be the second best game of the season for Garrett Cole this year. So good news-ish on the velo. That's about an average postseason velo bump right there. And good news that he was healthy and he pitched through the game and the Yankees won. But a little bit of bad news in there by not being able to go deep and giving up so many hard hit balls. But I think you saw some of the depth that the Yankees have struggled to put together over the course of the season. But Stanton taking a walk, Chisholm getting a hit, Alex Verdugo getting 2 hits. Like Soto and Judge, Judge in particular went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. This game story, if they'd lost, might have been written about Aaron Judge.
Very, very true. Very much could have been. I was surprised to hear, I didn't look at the batter versus pitcher splits before the game, but Michael Wacha has actually had a lot of success against Aaron Judge in his career. Wacha didn't stay in the game real long, but that was one of those matchups that I just didn't think would be as extreme in Wacha's favor as it has been, at least historically. There was one really interesting play in this game that I don't know if people outside of Yankees and Royals fans really paid that much attention to it, but there were 2 outs in the 6th. Bobby Witt Jr. was up. Hit ground ball to the left side. Jazz Chisholm, with momentum, cut in front of Anthony Volpe. I know Bob Costas saw it because he pointed it out, but Jazz makes the play, gets whipped by a step, half step. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this ends the inning. But the way Volpe was fielding that ball and with Witt's speed, there's a chance Witt beats that out. And it completely changes the game if Jazz doesn't make a pretty good, aggressive play cutting in front of his shortstop in that situation. You think about how little Jazz Chisholm has played third base. I thought that was a really important play
with Anthony Volpe. So
he was a great defender too.
Communication, good, good work. They didn't run into each other and start make it a bigger deal. So, and with a bad elbow. He needs. Is it the other elbow? It's not the non-throwing elbow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Richard's non-throwing.
Just for a guy who hasn't been playing that long to have chemistry like that, that's good. The other thing that I watched with a Royals fan at Stein's Beer Garden, and he had circled a couple bad calls, honestly, that went against the Royals and had kind of been yelling about them. I think, if I'm right, it's Michael Wacha throws a 2-2 pitch to Gleyber Torres, and the strike is called a ball. And I think that Torres, I don't know what he did after that. I think he walked, or maybe he got a hit after that. Maybe it was before his homer. When did he? No, he had
Homer was earlier. Yeah, Homer was a little earlier, but yeah, there were. So this was one of those games. You and I looked at ump scorecards afterwards to see. Adam Hamari was behind the plate. And it was kind of a typical game in terms of how it graded out.
He got 94% correct.
Yeah. Quarter of a run in favor of the Yankees in terms of the overall calls. I thought the weirdest call in this game, and maybe I'm just out of my mind, but Jazz Chisholm had a stolen base challenged at second. And I thought when they kept showing the replays in super slow-mo that you could see the tag on him just before he got to the bag. I thought they were going to overturn that, and they didn't. So that was a pretty big call that had a massive impact on this one. So if you're a Royals fan, you're probably a little salty about that too.
Yeah, but at least it was a close game. At least if you're a Royals fan, the Royals scored and hit some balls hard. And at least you got Cole Reagans, going in game 2. I'd take Cole Reagans over Carlos Rodon, though, this is a good pitching matchup and maybe a low-scoring game. Famous last words. There were, even was it Glaber's homer? Like weren't there 2 homers in this game that were to the short part of?
Yeah, even the Melendez one that was like 361 feet. It's like,
those weren't all homers in all parks,
right? Well, yeah, at least that cut both ways, right? That makes, from a neutral perspective anyway, that makes you feel a little bit better. But yeah, Reagans versus Rodon, obviously a big spot for the Royals to try and draw this one even. I think the key thing for me just about Carlos Rodon too is like when he was trying to pitch last year, he clearly wasn't healthy, right? And I think that's just most of the explanation for how he's been so much better in year 2 with the Yankees. He's just not dealing with stuff. 175 innings in the regular season, ERA just below 4. I think the one thing that's the problem, kind of, if I'm looking at the skills flaw that you can take advantage of, is homers. The Royals aren't necessarily a team built to hit a lot of homers, but you take the Royals out of Kansas City, put them into Yankee Stadium in this matchup. That's where I think there could be a little more of a problem just because of the circumstances. Like if you're the Yankees, you're happy to have Rodon because he's good. But I think Rodon matches up better with the Royals in Kansas City than he actually does in his home ballpark.
Yeah, and I think that the homers has been a reason that this year has seen Rodon really reduce his four-seam usage the most he almost ever has in his career. He's been sort of adding four-seamers as he's added velo and added nastiness to that pitch, and also because he doesn't have great command of his changeup, so he kind of went to more of a four-seam slider situation, for some of his best years. But the changeup's coming back, I think, because of those homers. So this year, Rodon gave up 21 homers on the four-seamer and 1 on the changeup. But it isn't a pitch that he has great natural command of. So, there's going to be some push and pull between what the count situation is, and if he stays in good counts, can he, get into places where the fact that he has a 92 location plus on the changeup this year, can he get into good enough counts where he can still throw the changeup even if he can't really command it well?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. But I think as we look back at this series, we're going to look at game 1 as one that got away from the Royals if they were going to pull off an upset. Let's shift our focus over to the NLDS matchups. Those series are actually off on Monday, so we got game 3s coming from both of those series on Tuesday. But the Phillies and Mets head to New York tied at 1. A little bit of a how we got here. Zach Wheeler pitched about as well as you can in the opener, and the Phillies lost anyway. How about 30 swinging strikes over 7 scoreless with just 1 hit and 9 Ks? It was Jeff Hoffman and Matt Strahm who got Metsed in the 8th inning, man. This script is becoming all too familiar.
Yeah, and some of them are just singles. It's when Mark Vientos hits a homer, I get it. That's what he does. That's his best thing. When Jose Iglesias, gets a little seeing eye single, or Harrison Bader, or JD Martinez hits a million hopper to the right to through the middle or whatever, right past an infielder. That's when I'm like, is this magic?
It's the count too. They were down in the count in a lot of these, right? Vientos took a 1-2 slider against Hoffman and got a hit off that. Nimmo took an 0-2 fastball against Strahm. There was a sac fly from Alonso in between that, and then I think Jose Iglesias was down 0-2, but punched one through on the 11th pitch. Just gritty, frustratingly difficult plate appearances where they're just finding space. And I don't know if that's all approach.
Maybe it's a good two-strike approach, you know?
Like it's having a plan for sure and just putting pressure on the defense by putting a ball in play. But it has to be so frustrating to be in that situation as the Phillies, to get the ace performance from your ace, to go to your A relievers and have it break down like that when you had opportunities ahead in the count to put those guys away.
And you put together one of the best bullpens of this stretch of Phillies. I mean, Jeff Hoffman, I know I'm just playing around with the game log, and this is a little bit meaningless, because I'm about to be like, between April, 10th and August 27th.
Oh, I love arbitrary endpoints. They're the best.
Guess why I picked those days. But anyway, I mean, this is a really dominant stretch for Jeff Hoffman. 37 innings with 52 strikeouts and a .72 ERA, 9 saves, 12 holds. I mean, he was dominant this season. And then, and you look at the box score, like they pitched Hoffman, Strom, and Kerkering against Peterson, Garrett, and Matone. Like, okay, so Peterson, Garrett, and Matone gave up the 5 runs, right?
Yeah, 6 scoreless from Peterson, Garrett, and Matone. Or Maton. That's great. I mean, that's just right, like Maton. That's exactly what you want on a day where we got surprised. So you and I were talking about the possibility of Kodai Senga maybe working out of the bullpen. They basically used him in a relief role. He just started the game. He pitched 2 in this one. I thought maybe 4 innings for the series. It's a 5-game series. That's probably like as much as you could expect. Maybe they'll push him 3 later on in the series when he comes back. But
not great leadoff homer, so he's not all the way back. He's Kodai Senga threw 94. He was, in the other start that he had this year, he threw 95.8. So the velo's not quite there. He wasn't, super comfortable, but he was better than other options, I think.
Schwarber got him for a leadoff homer, but he finished those 2 innings with 3 strikeouts. That was the only run that he gave up. So I think you can live with that. But you got to give Peterson, Garrett, and Maton a lot of credit for keeping the Phillies off the board for 6 innings, because that left the door open for that late rally to do what it did.
Yeah, and that 8th inning for the Mets was just like, you're just like, oh my gosh.
Like, another OMG guess, moment, huh? Like, weird.
It's just an amazing inning for them. I mean, Francisco Alvarez hits a single, 102 mile an hour single. That's just good hitting. Lindor has a 7-pitch at bat against Hoffman and works a walk after going down 0-2 with 2 swing strikes in the first 2 pitches on sliders. And then Vientos goes down 0-2, takes a slider for a ball, and then hits a single that he hits at 87 miles an hour, but still had a 990 expected batting average. So it's not luck the way we sometimes talk about luck, where it's like, a million hopper or whatever. But, when you go down 0-2, Matt Strom gets Brandon Nimmo. Yeah, went down 0-2, gets a fastball, hits a single, again, 530 XPA. So not luck that way, but just, you re-rack this and give a bunch of people 0-2 counts, and they don't do this usually. Pete Alonso hits a sac fly, and then Jose Iglesias, 10-pitch at bat with an 84 mile an hour single at the end off of a cutter. So you make Matt Strom throw 10 pitches, he throws, he goes away from his strengths a little bit, because you had this with Trevor May talking about this, where it's like the longer the thing goes, the more you'd be like, okay, well, I can't keep throwing him the same stuff. It's not working. So I'm going to throw this 3rd best pitch,
Yeah. Just another amazing sequence from the Mets to get that Game 1 win. You mentioned this earlier. Christopher Sanchez ended up starting Game 2. I think you're right. I think it goes beyond the home road splits. I think it comes down to off days and how you expect things to line up for the course of the series. So it worked fine. Sanchez pitched really well in Game 2, just 2 earned runs over 5 innings, 5 Ks. The decision I think I would be second guessing from the Phillies was the decision to start Edmundo Sosa over Alec Boehm. We've talked about Boehm, much like Lane Thomas, being a player that has some long-term splits against righties that leave a lot to be desired. It's a 93 WRC plus since 2022. Sosa's not better than that, and Sosa strikes out more in that split. So you get less power, more swing and miss. I couldn't quite wrap my head around what really transpired to lead to that decision, but it's being second guessed a lot less because of what transpired in game 2, just getting that win, getting that rally to come back. I think the decision people are thinking a lot about today from this game, if you gave Carlos Mendoza a chance to do it all again, would he have pulled Luis Severino and not let Severino face Bryce Harper a third time? Harper, of course, hit that homer that really elevated everything and got the Phillies running again, right? So it was a 2-out situation where, yeah, you don't really have a lefty you can go to, but maybe just avoiding Severino a third time against the heart of the order is the thing you would want to have back if you're Mendoza.
Yeah, I mean, we pointed it out before the game, and it really, and just in terms of how the game unfolded, it was really that stark where Severino was great. Second time through the order, and then as soon as it flipped over, Trey Turner gets a single. He hit the ball 102 miles an hour. Bryce Harper hits the homer 112 miles an hour. Nick Castellanos hits his homer 107 miles an hour, and to some extent the game is lost. I mean, it didn't work out that way. They battled back, and it wasn't just that, but in the moment it felt like, wow, that just was a huge turnaround, and that could be all she wrote. Now they did end up getting some runs back, and it was a kind of a cool seesaw game where the Mets are up 3-0, then the Phillies in that off of Severino tie it 3 each. Mets go up 4-3, then the Phillies go off in the 8th, and it's against Edwin Diaz, and once again he's walking guys. The command isn't great, and he gives up 3 earned. Has not been, vintage Edwin Diaz really all year, and especially this playoffs. And I know it's just a small sample with the reliever, and he could maybe turn it around tomorrow. But if Edwin Diaz isn't going to be Edwin Diaz, they're going to have a really hard time in this matchup, because Jose Budo's fine, and they use Tyler McGill, and he was all right, but they don't have a great bullpen if Edwin Diaz isn't giving them 4 outs in wins. I think that was the thing that worried me the most about this game, because they do come away from going to Philadelphia with a split, and that's okay. And they show the same stick-to-itiveness that they've had all year, where they were in both games, and it was back and forth, and there were big hits, and those were great games. But the biggest worry for me is that they threw Edwin Diaz in a game that they could have won, and they lost it, maybe on some level because of his pitching.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the decision to bring him in a little early when they did, I'm on board with that. It just didn't work in this instance. There's not much you can do about that. Like, the plan was good, the result was not in this case. But the series has been great so far. You get the sense there's a good chance it's going 5, that it's probably going to find its way back to Philadelphia. Game 3 is Aaron Nola against Sean Manaea. I do think the decision to flip Sanchez and Nola could pay off, given some of the struggles of the Phillies bullpen, because not only do you have the off day today for the travel day, but then you get the guy that should be able to give you 5 or 6 innings, maybe taking a little pressure off that relief unit in game 3, and you could have a shot at being a little more fresh going into game 4 as a result.
Yeah. And for the Mets, you're hoping, give Edwin Diaz some rest, and hopefully his knee feels a little better if that's part of the situation or whatever it is, and maybe the command comes back on some level, because the command has been awful. I was just looking through the pitch maps of what he did, and there was a lot of they were just waste pitches, that just easy takes.
Yeah, non-competitive pitches, absolutely brutal this time of year. Puts you in a bad spot, and definitely makes you wonder if health is a factor for Edwin Diaz. Let's move on to what's been the nightcap of the weekend so far, the Padres-Dodgers series, which is delivering all of the drama we expected. I mean, these 2 NL series in particular have been great, but I think there's a chance we'll get some pretty good mileage out of at least one of those AL series, if not both. Let's go back to game one, though. The first inning struggles of Yoshinobu Yamamoto have continued, and I never know what to make of that. I mean, that's just one of those random things that can happen where someone's not settling in quickly. A couple of big innings is all it takes to really blow up those numbers. There are some questions about the possibility of Yamamoto maybe tipping pitches in this outing. What did you make of this performance? It seems like it's part of the bigger picture of questions about the Dodgers rotation, not because we don't think Yamamoto is good, but because he missed a lot of time with injury and was still just kind of working his way back during the final weeks of the regular season.
You know, when I think of first innings things for foibles, I kind of wonder about, you know, what the underlying natural command is. And I think Yamamoto gets more credit for having sort of elite command when it's actually just it's fine, you know? And then the other part of it is just finding a feel for your pitches. Like, how quickly can you find what pitches are working for you that day and what's going on with them? Because when I look at Yamamoto, his fastball was only up 0.3 miles an hour. So he's not getting the same postseason velo bump as other people, except the splitter was up 2.3 miles an hour and the curveball was up 1.4. So, you know, finding the feel for those pitches at this new velocity. I know he's a big game pitcher. I'm not saying he's never been in a big game and this is nerves or, you know, whatever. He's pitched in plenty of big games in Japan. I'm just saying that on this day, given his injury history this season and given the stuff he had on this day, he had a little hard time sort of, you know, corralling it and doing the right things with it. I know on the other side of the coin, like Dylan Cease also gave up 5 earned runs and 3 1/3, as Yamamoto gave up 5 runs and 3. Except that Yamamoto had 1 strikeouts and 2 walks, whereas Dylan Cease had 5 strikeouts and 2 walks. And I'd be more worried about the Yamamoto outing than I would be Cease. Cease is like, okay, well, he's a slightly wild pitcher going up against a really disciplined team that also hits the ball really hard, and he's still got his strikeouts. So, you know, that wasn't so worrisome for me. I think on a pitching side, worrisome for me on the Padres side was that Adrian Morejon came in and did not help the situation. I don't think it was all his doing. Cease left some guys on. Estrada allowed the sort of final hit that made it all sort of unravel, but Morejon did not do anything good with his outing, and he's going to be important when it comes to the game that Martin Perez starts, or when it comes to just being the bridge to, I don't know, the Fabulous Four, I want to kind of call them, the Jason Adam, Tanner Scott, Jeremiah Estrada, and Robert Suarez, but maybe it's really the terrible 3 because Adam, Scott, and Suarez seem maybe a step above. But in any case, Morejon and Estrada have to be good against this Dodgers team, which is going to take their walks, grind it through, not really have any holes. Another thing that you could say if you're worried about if the Padres is the bottom of the order here. You got Will Smith with 2 walks, Gavin Lux with 2 hits, Tommy Edman with 2 hits, Miguel Rojas even got a hit. So that's going to make it so hard for you because you got to get some outs there before you flip the lineup back to Shohei Ohtani, who, by the way, hit a mammoth 3-run homer with the biggest bat flip and the most roaringest crowd. And just a huge moment for the Dodgers that just really swung the energy a little bit, and I think was maybe the key offensively for the Dodgers in winning this game.
I think there was a point during the season when we were talking to Trevor about when you're pitching to someone like Ohtani, maybe even Ohtani specifically, and you beat him one way. And in this case, I'm referring to the first plate appearance when Dylan Cease got Ohtani to fly out on a 99-mile-an-hour fastball up above the top of the zone. And the homer was on a fastball up above the top of the zone at 97. And I think it's one of those things where it's like you can get him once with something like that. It's hard to get him twice. And I think people were really surprised. Like, how did he hit that pitch out? It's like, well, he flew out a 99 up there last time, so maybe he was looking for it, and that's a big part of how he crushed that homer. But I think it just, as I kind of let that one sink in a little bit, it was only an inning later, too. The flyout was in the first, the homer was in the second. So I think that was maybe something that worked in Ohtani's favor a little bit, too.
ideal for the hitter, right? Oh, I got practice against it, and I didn't have to
Just
sit
saw
that
it.
long, and I got back up there, and I got to see it again. Yeah,
Hmm.
I would have tried to maybe just fill him up with back foot sliders or something. I don't know, but you are screwed because you know people do say you try to pitch him inside. Otani try to pitch him high and tight, and when I see a guy step to the plate with his hands really long levers and his hands in that kind of a stance, I think I want to throw this high and tight. Except Otani knows everybody all year has been trying to throw me high and tight. So when he cheats, he can do something there. And if your high and tight is more high middle, which is where Cease's 97-mile-an-hour fastball that we hit for a homer was more high middle than high and in, then Otani's little bit of cheating can really get out in front of that pitch and take it yards. So I was also saying to my kid, I think to some extent, some of the mechanics of Otani's swing that don't make it that interesting, like don't make it that beautiful to me. That kind of, he almost like, it's like a stepping in the bucket kind of, his hips like kind of go through fast, right? Because he kind of creates a lot of an opposite field path, right? Where it almost looks like he's stepping in the bucket. But that also helps him kind of get into a situation where he can step in the bucket and whip the hands through and hit something inside too. So, I mean, he pulls pitches, on the inner half and he does damage with them. So you're kind of screwed trying to find a place that you can live against Shohei Ohtani. You don't hit 300 with 56 homers with like a glaring hole that everybody can hit.
No, you do not do that. No. But I think there's a little bit of an unsung hero for the Dodgers, just their bullpen. Like in a game where the Padres hang 5 on Yamamoto, they didn't give up anything else with Brazier, Vesia, Evan Phillips, Michael Kopech. Blake Trinan got the final 5 outs, had a couple of walks, but his sweeper to end the game had Manny Machado flailing, right? So if you can win games this way, you're in every game. And that's something about having, the best lineup in the league. Like that's something the Dodgers do bring to the table. And it's so strange. Like the vibes around this series, even when we've talked about it, have been almost like the Dodgers are somehow an underdog. It's like, no, this is an even matchup. They're definitely not an underdog.
I mean,
and
they should be favored.
They should even be mathematically favored. Although now that 2 of the 3 are in San Diego, maybe that's shifted. But it's still like, it's one of those things where I think if you go back, if this series ends up being one that the Dodgers win, the game 1 bullpen performance of those 5 relievers is a big part of how they were able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks really well to their coaching and player development because Ryan Brazier comes like on a waiver claim. Evan Phillips is a waiver claim. Alex Vesia was a really small deal with the Marlins, and they identified something in his fastball. Michael Kopech was, I don't know, was he like a throw-in in that deal? I mean,
No,
he was part of the Tommy
wasn't a
Edman
throw-in.
deal. Obviously, they wanted him, but it was such a weird deal. And I don't think that people understood that Michael Kopech was maybe the best arm, at least in terms of stuff that was traded at the deadline, as among the relievers. So, that's a really great group, and they all pitched pretty well. Kopech was wild. But I did want to point out Evan Phillips, a little bit of Evan Phillips love. I know that with that sweeper, he's a little bit better righty on righty, but over the last 3 seasons, so this is 22, 23, and 24, these are the best relievers in baseball by Fangraphs WAR. Emmanuel Clase, Ryan Helsley, Tanner Scott, Devin Williams, Griffin Jacks, Evan Phillips. And over that time frame, a 2.21 ERA with just insane strikeout to walk ratio. Just a really great pitcher. And I think now in kind of a better spot. I think you do want Kopech and maybe Trinan, but I think Kopech was the plan for to close it out. And so I think you close things out with Kopech because he has that big fastball, and I think that's what I want out of my closers. It's also a big fastball that works lefty or righty, and Evan Phillips is a little bit weaker against lefties. You put Evan Phillips in against a chunk of the order that's a bunch of righties, boom, 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 3 outs. That's how I feel about it. So that was the good news for the Dodgers out of that game for sure.
The bad news for the Dodgers, I think, as you look at the rest of the series is, one, they're a pretty big underdog pitching-wise, game 3, with Buehler going up against Michael King. If Buehler just hasn't been himself. If you give me previous pre-second TJ Buehler, sure, then of course this is even maybe favoring the Dodgers, but he just hasn't been that guy. There's also concern about Freddie Freeman, though, right? He has the bad ankle, started game one, actually stole a base. And I wondered about that decision. It's like, on the one hand, they're probably not expecting him to run. On the other hand, it looked like he maybe hurt himself a little bit more sliding into the bag. And then he had an early exit from game two. That game was only 3-1 when Freddie Freeman left in the sixth inning on Sunday night. So his status is very much up in the air heading into game three. So a couple of warts for sure. And this game two on Sunday featured a lot. The Padres got on the board early. Jurickson Profar tricked pretty much everyone in the ballpark and everyone watching by pretending like he didn't catch a Mookie Betts would-be homer, only to show everybody a few seconds later that he had it.
He did do that to some extent, but I think what he actually was doing was taunting the fans. Because if you watch it, he goes into the fans, he catches the ball, and he turns around, and instead of displaying that he's caught the ball, so that's the part where people think, oh, he was pretending not to have caught the ball. Instead of doing that, he's hopping up and down and yelling at the fans, which I think is fair because they went toe to toe, like he was in their space and he brought the ball back. But it was a little bit mean. Is like they're adults. I know. I'm not. Oh, you're being mean.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a bunch of third graders were sitting in the left field bleachers last night.
But there's also these were grown-ups. It wasn't mean to Mookie Betts because like they're flashing home run, like the TV.
Oh, the graphics, yeah. Everyone thought it was a homer.
He's doing the home run trot. He's like all the way almost to third base before he realizes it's not a homer. I mean, it was a pretty fun moment. I thought it was great, and Profar has this like bone in his body where he loves to make people mad. I mean, it's part of who Profar is, and so it did turn on him a little bit where the fans threw 2 or 3 balls onto the field.
Yeah, not great.
And they threw something into the bullpen at Jeremiah Estrada too. So, they had to actually stop the game and make announcements about how you'll be ejected from the game. You throw someone on the field. And there was a weird sort of moment, I think in the 7th or 8th, where everyone just had to wait around to wait for some people to be ejected.
Yeah. And that was while Yu Darvish was working on a playoff gem, really. Like that was a kind of a critical moment in the game where that was going on. And Darvish, 7 innings, 1 run, 3 hits, only 3 Ks, but 82 pitches. And that's incredibly efficient. Like that is not necessarily like beyond expectations based on who Yu Darvish is, but probably beyond expectations that I had for him based on him being away for so long with a personal matter in the second half. It's kind of like the Yamamoto, because of the shape of his season, I've sort of removed some of the ceiling outcomes from Darvish. And other than it being only a 3 strikeout performance, this was phenomenal from Yu Darvish. I didn't have a 7-inning 1-run start from Darvish this early in the playoffs, especially, as something I expected.
Yeah, and he did something weird, which is so great. I love him. So all his pitches are up in velo, like mostly, like we've been talking about, and then the curveball's down 1.7 miles an hour. So he's throwing, it's not the eephus, but he's throwing the slow curveball, and he's played around where he's had the Pierce Johnson knuckle curve, and he's also had a slower curve. And so I'm guessing that he threw the curveball that wasn't Pierce Johnson's knuckle curve in that game, and that he threw it on purpose because it was also the second most he'd thrown the curveball all season. So he throws a ton of curveballs, and they just aren't hitting them. The average exit velocity on the curveball was 70.9, and he got a 46.9 mile an hour exit velocity on one of the balls in play. I just remember, I think I remember that one. I forget who it was, but someone just like took a full swing at that curveball and hit it like a foot in front of the plate. So I think he also, when you also look at this, 5 pitches that he used between 13 and 20% of the time. So slider, sweeper, curveball, splitter, 4-seam, like he was really using all of them. And he de-emphasized the cutter, which sometimes he throws as his basic fastball. So he, I think, was weird. Like he just was like, you think you know Yu Darvish, but I also have I have 8 pitches, so I can just be a totally different pitcher tonight. So I'm going to be a guy who's going to throw a bunch of slow ass curveballs when you expect the cutter or when you expect the slider.
Yeah, that was phenomenal from Yu Darvish in that spot. And the Dodgers had kind of one really good chance that they didn't make a whole lot out of. They had bases loaded, nobody out. That was the second inning. Got a sac fly to bring in one, but a line out double play ended it. And actually, Luis Arias had a couple of nice defensive plays early in this one, too. But all around great outing from Yu Darvish. There was jawing between Jack Flaherty and Manny Machado, even though at the time the Padres were up 3-1. So that was a little bit of a surprise. This is one of those rivalries. They talked about it during the game. It continues to increase in intensity in recent years. And I think meeting in the postseason on a regular basis will only continue to add fuel to that fire. Buehler versus King, though.
If there was something worrisome for the Padres, it was Xander Bogaerts leaving with a hamstring injury or just leaving with hamstring tightness or something. He did hit a homer. He kind of did this thing where he was like, fiddling around with his hamstring and didn't look good. And then he hit a homer and was wincing. But at least he didn't have to run the bases. He got to jog them. But I'll be looking forward to a news update from Dennis Lin about what's going on with his hamstring, because as much as this is a good team and still has some depth to it, they're getting closer to the back end of their, they lost Ha-Seong Kim and they lost Joe Musgrove. And if they want to make a deep run, they kind of, this is where the injuries have to stop a little bit. I mean, if you're putting Tyler Wade in there every day, like you're taking a step back in the lineup.
Yeah, you don't want to get too far down that bench if you can help it. Also, I bet you feel really smart if you're Mike Shildt in the Padres when David Peralta homers in the second inning, right? When you're mixing and matching in the bottom of the order and you're pressing the right buttons, that has to feel really good. It's also a good story in the sense that David Peralta, people probably remember this from a few years ago. Before he was a position player, he was a pitcher, had a lot of injuries, kind of came back around to the Cardinals system, and he's just carved out such an amazing, long career as a very solid outfielder, right? If you had told me at the time when David Peralta was first breaking back in as a position player that he would be playing in playoff games this far into the future, I don't think I would have believed you. So tip of the cap to him coming up with a big moment.
It was 15% better than the league average to stick this year. So
just keeps on doing it.
For the Dodgers going forward in the next game, we'll have some more time to talk about them, I guess. But Walker Buehler's curveball command is everything for me. I was looking at his game log, and there's the stuff, is going in the right direction for Buehler, where the cutter and the curve, the stuff is just generally going in the right direction, but the locations on the curveball go from he literally in the last 5 games went from 102 location plus to 91. That's really bad. 108 to 84. That's even worse. 104 to 87. That's Walker Buehler's command on the curveball, and it lines up exactly with what happens when I watch him. I'm like, is this a game where he can land the curveball, or is this a game where he keeps, dropping the curveball 5 feet short of the plate? And you may know that early, so they may have Landon Knack on the ready, in the first inning.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. Probably, we'll get a little more detailed about Buehler versus King on the Tuesday show, since we got an extra day before that one gets underway. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. On our way out the door, a reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Read all the great playoff coverage we have. We've got football, basketball, hockey, soccer, everything you could want, all for one low price. Theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Find Eno on Twitter at Eno Sarris. Find me at Derek VanRiper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.